How good is Dragon Ball actually? Everybody remembers their first experience with something, their first girlfriend, their first friend, their first kiss, their first anything. Well, just like a majority of kids in the world, my first anime was the Dragon Ball series. Everybody knows about the cultural shift in anime and how it was viewed prior to becoming cool. What I mean by this is 10-year-old Mabi could not go up to his friend and say, "Wow, did you see the new Yu-Gi-Oh episode? What about the new Dragon Ball episode? Hey, do you like Naruto?" None of that would fly, and for the most part, I was pretty alone in looking up Super Saiyan 1 million art. I also remember at this time, there were no anime toys in any popular American stores like there is now, and Amazon was still on the rise. Because of that, I actually ended up using a bunch of my toys and pretending like they were Dragon Ball and Naruto characters, even though it was fucking Darth Vader, Randy Orton, and fucking Indiana Jones with Jar Jar Binks playing Piccolo or something. I remember waking up on Saturday mornings to watch Dragon Ball Z Kai and staying up on Saturday nights to watch Dragon Ball GT. I also remember all of Super and how the Tournament of Power got insane hype and theories week in and week out. I remember watching Ultra Instinct for the first time live, and I remember the day that Toriyama unfortunately passed away. One of the worst things to happen this year because his work is irreplaceable and he has a gifted mind that's never to be replicated. Today, let's address the question, how good was Dragon Ball actually? Let's dissect the series and let's truly answer this question once and for all. If you like these videos, make sure to like and subscribe of course, and smack that bell. Dragon Ball is a series of stories that follows Goku and the Zir fighters, typically saving someone from something. Whether it's a city or the entire Earth, the solar system, or even the universe is entirely based on which story we're talking about here, as Toriyama has power scaled his way into different stories that display different amounts of strength. This was probably due to the fact that Dragon Ball has developed and arguably gotten better from what it was originally, at least in my opinion. A formula that prior to this wasn't really that present if I'm being honest, and I didn't know. Dragon Ball most influential, you are tired of hearing it, but how could this be any closer to the truth? Dragon Ball is the first martial arts manga with a shonen formula to really make a mark on the industry, and there's going to be some fucking nerd in the comments talking about Astro Boy or whatever. Just be fucking serious. Now, this doesn't mean that Dragon Ball is simple or basic, because for as how good of a statement Dragon Ball is the most influential is, that statement is equally as bad to me and is usually adopted by elitists and pseudo-intellectuals who don't understand how Dragon Ball actually parallels our real world. So, starting off with Dragon Ball OG, which will likely get the least amount of attention besides Dragon Ball Super, OG Dragon Ball isn't bad by any means, and in fact it's pretty necessary to the plot because it's literally canon, and if you jump straight to Z, you won't really understand what's going on, so don't listen to anyone telling you to skip this one. It is kind of just your run-of-the-mill martial arts story though. Goku is a baby found by Roshi, he's trained to be a warrior, and a bunch of otherworldly characters end up being integrated within the story through the world tournaments, competitions to see who is and isn't the greatest fight of all time. Toriyama kind of just has fun, I think, and there isn't a lot of narrative build-up or storytelling that's massive for any of these characters. Most of it is set up for Z, and like I said, OG Dragon Ball is very good, but to me, it is the worst installment of Dragon Ball besides Dragon Ball Super. Now, moving on to Z, which will be the longest part of this video by large and far, it's the meat of the potatoes of the entire industry and has the most iconic and for that matter best moments. I truly think Toriyama was at his absolute best here. The Saiyan saga has a simple but effective plot. Goku has been found by his Saiyan brethren, and with it, the Dragon Balls are located. It's kind of weird that the interpretation was that Vegeta, Raditz, and Nappa came down to Earth to specifically genocide the Earthlings, which makes no sense. If all they wanted to do was just kill all of them, all they had to do was blow the planet up, which they were fully capable of doing so. Vegeta and Raditz specifically seek out the omnipotence of the Dragon Balls and aim to become immortal beings, which would end in them probably destroying humanity as a sign of their strength. What I also enjoy about the Saiyan saga is the fact that this is the start of Gohan's journey as well, who prior to the Blue Saga was one of my favorite characters, especially growing up and being the same age as Gohan at this time. Piccolo also gets major development here as well. Outside of that, I feel as if the other characters don't particularly get much, and that's a running theme throughout the entire story. Goku himself sort of acts as a narrative device because of who he already is. Think about it like this. Goku is pure at heart, and to see a Saiyan who isn't extremely violent was massive for Vegeta, because I believe that there was a small change of heart. Maybe not to a large extent, as he's still a dickhead in the Frieza saga, but I do think some interest was there. Violence was all Vegeta really knew, to be honest, and for that matter, Nappa and Raditz too. Anybody who was massively stronger than them politically or physically were literally monsters like the Ginyu Force, or Frieza and King Cole, or King Vegeta, Vegeta's father, who was also no saint, and he literally traumatized multiple Saiyans that appear later in the story, even if it's not technically canon. Similarly, this parallels Piccolo's development on multiple levels. Piccolo no longer becomes a selfish and destructive being because he sees that same pure heart in his now student Gohan that exists within Goku, the man who beat him previously. There's a moment of submission, a moment of vulnerability, to raise someone as if they were his son, not just to be better than him, but to also better himself. His sacrifice is one of his character-defining moments that shapes Dragon Ball for what it is, which we'll get into later. The Frieza saga is important for the fact that Goku and Vegeta both get monstrous moments that shift the entire landscape of Dragon Ball. In the Saiyan arc, Vegeta realizes that perhaps another warrior that's not akin to a caveman or a mass murderer exists, but in the Frieza saga, he realizes that he's not the strongest, that he's not the best, and that ultimately there's someone out there far more legendary that he has to chase, even if that person should hypothetically be under him due to his status. It's the first step we all realize in our journeys: you're not the best. You aren't the strongest, and fate has willed you into a position where the status you once held, whether that was in a small domain or a larger one, is simply a fictitious reality you conjured in an attempt to feed your own ego. It was a perfect regression for Vegeta, especially after realizing that Goku was going to be a Super Saiyan. It's irrelevant whether or not he knew that transformation actually existed, because at that time it was a position of power, something Vegeta clutches onto in an attempt to justify everything he's done up to at this point and his masculinity. Goku, on the other hand, finally sort of gives into his nature as a Saiyan, and the man who was once pure and soft-hearted becomes a demon and toys and destroys Frieza for episodes on top of episodes on top of episodes on top of episodes. I think the distinction between the two is pretty fire and was the most notable thing about this arc, besides the Ginyu Force dancing and obviously the introduction of the Namekians. Remember when Goku eventually said they were a bunch of Piccolos? Yeah, that's right, our Shounen protagonist is racist. I don't really like separating the Cell arc from the Android arc, and I view it as one conglomerate arc. I don't really see a point of separating them, especially when the time between Cell's introduction as a character and the android's awakening is rather short in the main timeline. Out of every arc in Dragon Ball, this is my favorite arc ever, by far and large, besides maybe, and I use maybe very lightly, the Tournament of Power, only because of the fact that I have very, very direct nostalgia with the Tournament of Power. I don't necessarily have direct nostalgia with the Cell arc because that was airing before I was born, but either way, I mean, the most iconic moments are here, the best fights are here, and to me personally, Dragon Ball should have ended right here. I'll get into that a little later, but let's talk about Trunks, a man who sort of exists within the middle ground of both Vegeta and Goku as a Saiyan. He's not necessarily violent, nor is he repulsive in his actions similar to primal Saiyans, but that desire and need for vengeance does plague him and is apparent throughout the arc. What's more important isn't who he is necessarily, but what he is, Vegeta's son, and when Vegeta sees the Super Saiyan transformation, it's damning to him, something he's never seen or achieved in his life as a warrior. Transformed at last is my favorite Dragon Ball episode by far. Seeing Vegeta break down emotionally over two goalposts that seemingly shift and shift, as if his death wasn't enough to see that, is sickening to me as a man. Not because the content itself is disgusting, but because it's the most real and authentic the series gets in general. How can he possibly call himself a man, a father, or a husband if he's unable to achieve what he truly wants? It's a dissection of what society itself views us as. To Vegeta, as a man, you're either useful or happy. However, at this point, Vegeta viewed himself as neither, and that isn't just a blow to your ego, but it's a blow to your character. Seeing him achieve Super Saiyan out of pure rage, then violating Android 19 was beautiful and one of the most satisfying things I've ever seen in my life. And I've been massaged by women multiple times, so that in of itself should tell you something about how special this scene is to me. What's even more satisfying is Gohan. Ah yes, the most iconic scene in all of Dragon Ball. Argue with your mother, hot take here. Super Saiyan 2 was more iconic than Super Saiyan 1 and was a far more hype and better transformation. It was a step in the right direction for Gohan because he finally gives into his fate. He finally gives into his nature and the position he's in and becomes unstoppable, literally whooping Cell around like The Rock did to his opponents in 2000. It's very interesting that Gohan leaned more towards Vegeta's side than Goku's side here, and he even becomes cocky, which he immediately gets humbled for when Cell decides to nearly destroy the Earth in an attempt at victory, which he then gets humbled for again when Cell regenerates and becomes the ultimate being that can destroy the solar system and everything in it. Overall, the Cell arc is gorgeous in its storytelling, and it's one of the most flawless shonen arcs we've ever seen in manga history. I have mixed feelings about the Buu saga. There's a point when you're writing a story where you get so good, it's very hard to top what you've done before. And every main shonen has pretty much suffered from this. Because of that, you naturally have to integrate some things in that can be questionable, especially for your viewers. I think it's natural that the Buu saga is the most controversial arc to the Dragon Ball community, and its reputation is very split for many different reasons. I like Buu as an antagonist, but he also feels too similar to Frieza and Cell, almost as if like Frieza and Cell were just kind of thrown together and turned pink. Buu is both a being who has been around for a while causing destruction and mayhem, and he's an alien life form with the ability to absorb and steal others' abilities with multiple forms, and because of this I don't really know how much I like him at all, and his inclusion in the series causes some major filler because Babidi fucking sucks. All that Majin bullshit kind of fucking sucks. On the other hand, if Buu never existed, we would have never gotten Majin Vegeta, as if Vegeta couldn't get any better. The climax of his character happens where he sacrifices himself for the greater good of humanity after he realizes that the path that he had went on was wrong and dishonorable at that. Seeing Super Saiyan 2 Gohan had thrown him into a frenzy that wasn't similar to how he had lost it in the Cell saga. This time he would have done anything to get a slight advantage over Goku, even if it was being controlled, something the real Vegeta would never do. I think this is where Goku is also the most questionable in his actions, which isn't bad because my best interpretation for why he was so contradictory and unfair in his actions was because just as any man is, he was confused and didn't really know what to do. Passing on the torch to the younger generation was never going to work. Goku needed to be there to protect them, and making the same mistake he made with Gohan wasn't an option. Goten and Trunks should only become warriors if they want to, not because they have to because of some status they need to live up to. Even though I'm sure Goku was very happy with the way Gohan turned out, Gohan probably and quite frankly wasn't, which is why he becomes a student and a normal guy instead of like his father. And everyone makes fun of Gohan for dropping the Potara, but I think that was the point where Goku kind of realized that Gohan isn't him. We have children so that we can help them grow into their own people. not many versions of you or someone you want them to be. A child following his parents' footsteps or becoming like them should only happen as a byproduct of how you choose to lead them. They cannot be indoctrinated into your lifestyle, otherwise you're just robbing them of the human experience. A sin that Goku commits despite being pure at heart. Ultimately, I think the Buu Saga is cool. Yeah, there's a lot of bullshit that's really bad and really irks me, like Trunks and Goten being really fucking annoying and stupid, but in fairness, they're like 10 years old, and the Patara themselves being so weird, but it wasn't bad by any means. I wouldn't say that the Buu Saga is unwatchable. Dragon Ball Super, on the other hand, from Z, is a disservice to Dragon Ball as a series, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. I have a video somewhere in my archives really tearing into DBS, and I plan on redoing it next year, March, but DBS sucks a lot of the time because it feels like a cheap imitation of what Dragon Ball was. So many of the decisions made were so questionable that longtime fans like me ended up skipping episodes or parts in an attempt to grasp at anything worthwhile for this story. At this point in the story, Vegeta should get a big win, but he was cucked out of both killing Frieza and Goku Black. Look, I get it. Vegeta needs to lose because it is a major part of his character, but when does he win exactly? There certainly has to be some kind of resolution, especially since both of them are like fucking 50 years old. Some kind of win that isn't just a brownie point. I wouldn't even have an issue with him losing, but it almost seems like he forgets his losses and just moves on. At least in Z, this affects him wholeheartedly to the point where it's damn near uncomfortable to watch, but what the fuck? Now he just doesn't care in Super? Not to mention the fact that the entire Frieza arc is shit. It is absolutely atrocious. God, I don't even want to get into it. Jesus Christ, what in the blue fuck was anyone thinking here? The Goku Black arc is also horrendous. Zamasu as an antagonist is like, are we serious? And then Trunks wins the entire thing with the Sword of Hope. Also, let me get this straight. Goku couldn't get the win over him, Vegeta couldn't, and Vegito couldn't. A fusion that looks like a joke because he technically has never won a battle, but future Trunks can. Look, I have no issue with Trunks beating Zamasu or whatever, but he beats a melting and disgusting version of him fused with Goku Black with a spirit bomb sword. Are you kidding me? He beats him with a fucking spirit bomb sword. God fucking damn it. What I can say about Super that's really good is the fact that the Tournament of Power isn't really that bad. Yeah, Jiren is a fucking dork in all honesty, but for what it's worth, it's a very good tournament arc and is the second favorite Dragon Ball arc of mine. It's a story of nostalgia because finally the Z fighters feel at least somewhat important and useful, and it isn't just Gohan, Goku, Frieza, and Vegeta being important. Yes, the manga is better. Yes, I get it, but the Super anime was an embarrassment and a stain on his legacy that will not be forgotten, not by the likes of me at least. Dragon Ball GT has this very weird and rambunctious reputation, and honestly, GT is far better than Super and actually feels like Dragon Ball. It has its moments of feeling like it's a fan-made project. The plot in of itself is sort of questionable, and I think Goku becoming a kid again was definitely an attempt to get viewers to watch out of nostalgia, which doesn't work because of how different the two are in basically everything, but as I said before, it doesn't deviate too far from the things that made Dragon Ball special in the first place, so I can't really hate that much, I guess. Dragon Ball GT sort of feels like those things from the 90s where they try to predict what life would be like in the 2000s and has a very grunge sci-fi-esque feel to it. I mean, just look at the villains in GT versus Z and Super. They feel far more futuristic, far more dystopian, if you will, technological in design, which to me is a welcome change in Dragon Ball, to be honest with you, and looks very good aesthetically. The story in of itself isn't bad, but an issue I have is that I don't feel as if any character really gets an arc to truly develop or shine, and as I said before, it just feels like a nostalgia dump for any longtime fans of the story. Overall, GT isn't bad and isn't mediocre. It's slap dab in the middle of being kind of good, very nostalgic, but lackluster in what it offers, and I can understand why it's forgettable or why someone really wouldn't like it, and I can also understand why someone would like it. I mean, it's just a very strange implementation of the Dragon Ball narrative, and a very strange kind of inclusion in it, especially since it's not considered canon with Super's existence, so I really don't understand. Dragon Ball to me is a staple in human history, and if any anime is remembered 100 years from now, it will be Dragon Ball. How do we better ourselves? How do we wake up and decide to tell ourselves, today, you're going to show them how good you are? It's a path of acceptance, harsh truths, and nature and its cruelty humbling you left and right in an attempt to teach you lesson after lesson. Despite this, Dragon Ball has its issues like a lackluster cast of characters and very bad decisions through each installment that costs its value in the critical market to me and sacrifices what makes it great for monetary gain. In the end, this happens to everything though. Every big anime or manga has suffered from this one way or another, and I can't be mad at such a legendary man like Toriyama wanting his duckies. Similarly to Togashi, he forever has my respect for passing away while dedicating his life to his craft, and even in the heights of his sickness, he still gave us something to chew on until his last breath. He will forever be immortalized in the culture and will forever have my heart and soul. May he rest in peace. I really wish I could talk about Daima, but I've been refraining from watching it because even though Toriyama worked on it, it doesn't feel right watching Dragon Ball now that he's gone. But perhaps that's all the more reason to watch it. I'm sort of conflicted. Let me know what you think about Daima down below. Overall, the Dragon Ball series gets an 8.5 out of me, with OG getting like a low 7, DBZ getting a 10, DBS getting like a middle 7 being generous, and GT getting an 8, which probably ends up around an 8.5. I would have covered the movies, but there's like 20 of them, and this video is already long as it is, and that's considering the fact that I kept it as vague as possible because I really did not want to talk about Tien's fucking character despite him being awesome. But let's be real, he's not really that important. Please don't fucking try be me, but yeah, expect more Dragon Ball content in the future as well as anime content. It's Mabi, the guy who does anime reviews, recommendations, rants, retrospectives, and more. And until next time, y'all, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment on my channel. Peace out.